Every country on Earth is in debt. The US owes over $38 trillion, the EU around $14 trillion, Japan nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich and export-heavy nations like Saudi Arabia, Germany, and China owe massive sums. But here's the paradox: if everyone owes money, who's actually owed? Debt isn't just a burden, it's the invisible architecture of the modern world, the system holding up every war, crisis, boom, and bailout. And if you follow the trail long enough, you'll discover something unsettling. The world doesn't owe anyone, it owes itself. How it all began: the story starts not on Wall Street, but in wartime in 1694. England was running out of gold while fighting France. Merchants offered loans in exchange for steady interest payments backed by future taxes. To manage it, the Bank of England was born, and so was the idea of the government bond. For the first time, a state could spend money it didn't yet have. That was revolutionary. France copied it. The Netherlands improved it, and the US later used it to fund its own revolution. Debt became a sign of credibility, not weakness. The power to borrow was the power to rule. Empires once conquered land for gold. Every bank lends, and every citizen is both debtor and creditor, through taxes, savings, and pensions. Take the US again. Of its $38 trillion debt, about half is held by investors, mostly Americans themselves. Banks, pension funds, the Federal Reserve, even the government owes itself. Roughly one-third is foreign-held, mainly Japan, China, and a few European countries. So when people say America owes China, that's true, but it's only about 2% of the total. Most of America's debt is a loop, money flowing from Americans to the government and back again. And it's not just America. Japan lends to the US lends to Europe, Europe lends to developing nations, and those nations buy Western bonds in return. It's a global circle of promises, a giant game of hot potato, where every player owes the next, and the only rule is, don't drop it. The real power, the markets behind all of this, sits another layer: the markets, hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks manage tens of trillions. They decide which nations borrow cheaply and which must beg for survival. When confidence fades, currencies crash and governments fall. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives, and at the center of it all are central banks, the true priests of modern finance. They don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time the Federal Reserve buys bonds, it prints new money. Every dollar in circulation represents debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. The big illusion: governments don't actually plan to pay their debt back. Not now, not ever. They just roll it over, refinancing old promises with new ones. Interest is the real product, the rent charged for stability. If the US somehow paid off all its debt, the global economy would collapse. Treasury bonds are the safest asset on Earth. Banks, funds, and central banks depend on them. Paying them off would destroy the foundation of the financial system. So instead, governments keep borrowing, not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes capitalism's heartbeat, pulsing through every pension, mortgage, and market. The truth about "we owe it to ourselves." Politicians love to say that phrase, but it's only half true. Interest payments don't flow evenly. They flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to investors and institutions. Debt doesn't just transfer money between countries. It transfers wealth between classes. That's why global inequality and global indebtedness rise together. The system rewards those who own debt and punishes those who pay it. Debt used to mean bondage. Today, it means balance, a delicate one, built entirely on trust. Because once that trust breaks, the illusion ends, and we remember what debt really is: a promise that can't last forever. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe, because history still has the answers. Now they issue bonds for interest. The battlefield moved from the front line to the balance sheet. The Great Debt Web. Fast forward 300 years. Debt has gone global. Every nation borrows.